morning, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Business Powerhouse brought to you by CIMA Sri Lanka and the Entrepreneur LK. Today's Powerhouse is a fellow membership holder of CIMA UK and has over 3 decades of experience and is also a visionary leader in business technology. Please join me in welcoming Director CEO of LOLC Finance PLC and Chairman of LOLC Technologies Limited, Mr. Conrad Dias. Good morning, Conrad, and welcome to the session.
Good morning, Varsha. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. How have you been?
Good. Could be better with the current situation. I think it's turning out to be better. So I think it's really good to see the things are getting back to normal to a certain extent.
As normal as they can.
In a new normal way.
Yeah. So we're hopping right on to the current situation, not just in Sri Lanka, but even globally. We know that the financial sector plays a huge role in a country's economy, and that the current economic crisis that we're facing as a country has obviously impacted every single business that's operating today in different ways. What would you say has impacted the financial sector as a result of this crisis? And what are the measures that LOLC is taking to make sure that they are on top of their cash flow and other operational issues?
Okay, I think this is a completely different time for many people. I think from a personal life perspective, as well as any business perspective, I think there are so many challenges and so many changes which has happened not only in Sri Lanka. Yeah. As we see, I think even in the globally, there is a huge change which is happening in terms of the even at the macroeconomic level. Yeah. As we know that I think every country has virtually printed money to kickstart the economies of many. I think the repercussions of that, we don't know how it will come. But it has been a very challenging time for every industry. And as you correctly said, the financial services sector being the main contributor in terms of the economic drive or the macroeconomic drives, I think it has affected to a certain extent as well. From a country perspective, I think Sri Lanka got multitude of challenges. I think not only the coronavirus or the pandemic I think before that we were because of the terrorist attack, and that was impacted very much to the industries like the tourism industry, which impacted the whole country because the Sri Lankan economy was dependent on to a certain extent with the tourism industry. So that had an impact on the on financial services, where when your customers are impacted, when you're financing those customers and then there's a whole industry is impacted, that had a bigger impact in terms of the financial services companies as well, which amounted all organizations to give moratoriums and reliefs to the customers to basically ask them to stay in business and hoping that the businesses will start soon. Then came the pandemic, and the pandemic postponed further. So it has been quite a lot of challenging times. However, from an LOLC group perspective, since I'm on the board of LOLC as well, LOLC main board as well, I think group perspective, we as an organization diversified into many industries. Plus, not only in Sri Lanka, we have diversified into other countries as well. As we speak, that we are operating in almost 9 countries, and we are expanding that footprint in Africa and the Central Asia region. So that gave us a very good position vis-a-vis the other companies or the competitors to be ahead of the game as our parent company or LOLC Finance parent company had that backing in terms of from a cash flow position, as well as the brand name which was created by LOLC gave us that strength, the financial stability and the strength as an organization.
Yeah, right. And obviously, you're a fintech enthusiast. I've read up on it so much, like every single website mentions that about you. And so much so that you've been recognized not only locally, but also internationally as the only Sri Lankan to be inducted to the Global CIO Hall of Fame 2020. Um, and you have carried that experience, that knowledge into founding fintech platforms like ipay and OS. And you've also contributed to quite a few startups in Sri Lanka as well, pickme, Odoc, if I'm just like to name a few. So you obviously have a very clear vision on the Sri Lankan startup ecosystem. In your perspective, what would you say? Can you share like even a concept or something that the Sri Lankan startup ecosystem is yet to see?
Very good questions, very appropriate question. I think the Sri Lanka is missing in terms of creating that unicorn startups, right? Very few has come to that. I think that's something that which I think all young entrepreneurs, young startup ventures should look at. Basically, they should look at how do you create that, not a me too kind of a startup, right? When I say me too, everyone wants to do, when you say fintech, everyone wants to do payments. Everyone wants to do something that which is copying something, right? So I think it's especially if it is a technology-driven startup, right? So there are many other startups which have at one point of time, the most of the businesses have been a startup and they're doing very well. And so I think from a fintech or a technology-driven startup perspective, I think our youngsters needs to look at how can you create that in the intellectual property IP and not creating a Me Too product and go beyond Sri Lanka. I think that's something that we need to thrive on. Being a Sri Lankan company and getting into another country and creating that value. That is something that we need to seriously look at from all startup perspective, because the Sri Lankan economy is small. That is a fact. It's a 20 million population. But if we look at the other economies, in the Asian region and African region is far more bigger. Right? Even if you take Pakistan, it's far more bigger. Even if you take Indonesia, Philippines, and Bangladesh. So we have the talent. I think the technology talent is there. I think we need to protect it, the talent to remain in Sri Lanka. I think we should open up our talent to look at the outside Sri Lanka in terms of creating here, but creating a Sri Lankan company going to other countries is something that which all startups need to look at, and not being just a Me Too product. The innovation is there is technology is there, but it's the business model that we need to get it right. So one other thing that I want to tell to the startup ecosystem or the startups that you want to do, it's not always just technology. It's the business model that you run. Right? You can create an app, you can create a website, you can create a technology product to sell. But how do you drive that technology product from a real business sense is something that you need to really focus on if you are to thrive. Because as you know, there are very few startups, successful startups in the country, and most they start up, but they go down faster also.
That consistency and the going concern is what's not there in a lot of startups. They're very enthusiastic for, say, the first 1, 2, 3 years, and then after that, if they don't find things kind of going their way, it just some of it just die a natural death, because they're just like, you know what, nothing seems to be happening. But I think that's why we also kind of need to create an environment that encourages startups and is supportive of startups, because I personally know, because I run a business myself, the financial aspect of it, or getting financial help when you're starting up a business, most of the kind of financial institutions aren't really supportive of small businesses, especially because of the whole, I mean, I understand it from a financial company, like a finance perspective of you're not sure of the repayment capability of a small business, because obviously there's not a lot of financial backing involved. But I think to support these ideas and make sure that we prevent talent from actually leaving the country and retain it so that we make use of those ideas, a lot of stuff can kind of happen in terms of financially and also creating an environment that's beneficial for the startup ecosystem.
I think you're spot on. I think I would rather, if some of the startups are listening, I don't mind, telling this on air. Basically, we do love to support startups who have that vision in terms of creating. I think pickme is one of the classic cases, right? And even ODOC, they have that vision, and the team who's involved. I mean, we have invested in some more other startups also, technology, non-technology driven, and some are technology driven, purely technology driven startups, not only in Sri Lanka, but even in the other parts of the world that we are looking at. So I think what is important as a company which is in the financial services sector, we do finance differently from a banking sector perspective, especially micro entrepreneurs who doesn't have collateral, and we have given non-collateral based loans. So that's something that we do in and out. So similarly, we wanted to create a fund for startups as well, right? So then how do you create that value? I think what is important is, as a Sri Lanka, we need to create that intellectual property within the Sri Lankan, right? It's not creating just the shops for just to make money out of this labor arbitrage position for some other IP-driven organization. I don't want to name, but that is what literally happening in industry. So the others will try to exploit the labor arbitrage position or the cheap labor position rather than creating value as a country.
Yeah, that's so true. And you being a leader in business technology and having a lot of vision and kind of disrupting the traditional business model by adapting technology into your processes to kind of stay ahead of time. How is your approach to adopting technology in the finance sector different from a typical finance company's approach?
Okay, so I would say, as you know, that I came from a technology background. I mean, a finance and a technology background, right? So I've been there as a CIO for quite a long time in the group. And being in technology, I saw a lot of things that the technology can do to a business to help the business to thrive. So from an LOLC group perspective, if you really look at it, that's why even in the countries that which we are now newly starting or approaching, we go on a technology first strategy. We believe that the technology is the most important thing for finance companies to survive in the future. So that's not only, I mean, I was part of it. Of course, our board of directors, everyone was in it from the start itself. So that's why that we created, if you really look at ipay as a platform, we call it ipay, a platform beyond payment. It's sounds payments, but it's a beyond the payment platform. The reason basically creating that ecosystem, financial ecosystem. I would say it's like a challenger bank or a challenger finance company, but supported by the existing finance company. That's the beauty of it, right? So the existing finance company. So we identified it early stages where we saw, since we were operating in many other parts of the world also, we saw how those markets have been challenged. More advanced market have been challenged by technology. So the technology became a bigger play. So we adopted technology at early stages. Not that we didn't have challenges. I think typically most of the banking sector company, I do understand, or a financial services sector company, when they want to adopt technology, I think since I sit on the other side now, I see how the resistance and the challenges comes. It's not because that they want to resist, but it's simply because of the fact that they don't see how the technology can help. right? It's a gap in terms of that knowledge, I would say, because they are purely a financial or a finance organization. When the technology comes, they don't see how the technology can help. So we bridged that gap at early stages, and we had a strategic initiative. So that's the difference. So I think that's why that we challenge ourselves. Nothing but we challenge ourselves.
Yeah, and the fact that you're saying adapting to technology is something that a lot of people are kind of hesitant to, and that's something that we see in like a lot of companies where they're so used to the traditional paper-driven process sometimes, where they are so reluctant to kind of, even though they know that changing it with technology is going to shorten their time and make things so much easier, it's really difficult to kind of drive change in terms of technology in any company, in any process that's so used to the traditional methods of doing things. So I can understand the fact like why people are hesitant to adopt technology. Because I mean, finance, like if a finance system crashes, then people are like, okay, so then we don't have any paperwork to kind of depend on as well. So, but I think you guys are doing a really great job, because we spend most of our time either on our laptops or on our phones. You know, the fact, especially with like all these lockdowns and all coming in, also us having to go out and pay bills or, you know, do any form of transaction or anything, it's our mobile phones that we kind of depend on. Like it's gone from shopping to browsing to doing make FDs online, you name it, you know, everything, we just look for our phones. So if you had an opportunity to reinvent how the finance system works by optimizing the use of mobile phones with very easy, straightforward processes, how would you get about doing that?
I have one principle that which we always use even in ipay, right? So I think one of the key things that we need to look at is I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, how many of the viewers are familiar with that. It's called the first principles of design, right? Or first principles thinking, right? If you we look at when you are starting even OES for that matter, or for ipay for that matter, when we look at it, we apply that first principles design thinking. I'm sure this concept was very familiar with Elon Musk is one of the proponents of these first principles of design, right? We looked at banking as a service. Banking, if you look at from a customer perspective, if you don't think what these current rails are not there, current banking rails are not there, how do you do it? With the technology, with the things that you have in and around you. So when you apply that, I think you can gain a huge efficiency in terms of servicing the customer, right? But then you have to come back to, okay, the current situation where you are in, because you can't change that rails which is already existing. But traditionally, if you look at it in the banking services sector or banking or financial services sector, we have been adding technology on top of the existing rails, existing layers, right? So when you do that, it increases the cost, it increases the inefficiencies, because that all the inefficiencies are there, whether we have the latest technology or the latest technology drive, but the all inefficiencies are already existing, and we build on that inefficiency only. So you won't be able to gain the full advantage. But if you look at from a first principles perspective, you'll be able to see what you need to do, basically what you need to do and what you need in order to do that, what you need. Then you apply some of the existing banking rails or the things that we need to give it to a certain extent to get it done, because you're not operating in a full digital world. It's a phygital world, and you have the people want to come to your branch. There are legality issues. So you try to revolve around that. So if you do that, I think you can get a very efficient bank. So if you really look at ipay is on that journey. ipay is not only in Sri Lanka. Now we are looking at even Australia. We are looking at Australia. And the other countries we have already existing is in Cambodia and Pakistan. We are challenging our existing financial services with ipay so that we will be more parallel in that. And ipay is completely designed from a perspective of completely rethinking the banking and how you can. I think we were one of the first to onboard customers digitally with the digital KYC and created almost about a huge number of bank accounts using the digital KYC during the COVID time.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. Finally, I just want to move into something that I've also been researching, because a lot of more people are kind of investing in that these days, and that's blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. With more and more people investing in crypto, do you see finance companies adapting to it in the future?
Okay, I'll split that question to two things, right? One is the crypto asset or the cryptocurrency side of it, which is the crypto asset, and the other one is the blockchain as a technology. Of course, from a financial services sector or banking sector, adopting the blockchain architecture technology will definitely bring certain values, because that it's a trustless ledger mechanism, right? So therefore, because you don't have to have the trust built in, or you don't need to have monitoring the trust aspects of it. So it's a trust being built into the technology itself, right? So therefore, I think the blockchain technology is something that, as an industry, I think that we could adopt in exchanging many information and many use cases which are there in terms of the banking and financial services sector, especially in terms of the settlement side of it, the automated settlement side of it, right? So when it comes to cryptocurrency, I'm a little skeptical on the cryptocurrency. I mean, I myself has a small investment in cryptocurrency just to see. I mean, I was doing this research as far as 2011, 2010 period. I've been looking and talking about cryptocurrency as well. So the cryptocurrency is a different game altogether. It's like, whether if you ask whether you will play in the share market or not, right? Whether you will buy shares and you play in the share market or not. So the cryptocurrency is a more of a demand driven. I think there is a lot of hype created out of it as well. So I think in my view, the cryptocurrency, the central bank driven cryptocurrency, I don't know whether you have heard CBDCs, central bank driven cryptos like the CBDCs, which will have a greater future. Because when the world is going to the digital economy, and when you want to make digital payments, I think the crypto-driven assets which are created from a central bank-driven cryptocurrencies would be a great thing, so that you can again remove the inefficiencies and remove a lot of inefficiencies in terms of the payment rails and facilitating the total payment side of it. But that has to be in a central bank driven cryptocurrency. It's basically the same fiat currency represented in a digital currency is the one that which will be. So there won't be any play in terms of the currency play there, whether it will be a rupee represented in rupee, dollar represented in dollar, that kind, or yuan represented in yuan in central bank driven cryptocurrency. So that will help again to really drive this digital payments ecosystem. So one of the countries who have done a similar kind of an approach is, we are part of it in terms of even ipay is using that, is in Cambodia. Cambodia has created a central bank driven, somewhat similar central bank driven cryptocurrency platform, which is a wallet platform.
Okay.
Right. So we have integrated ipay into that, and we are in the second stage and the third stage of that in terms of the crypto asset. They use a blockchain architecture. The and they are connected all the banks into that. So that's something to remove inefficiencies and basically making the payments seamless, right? I think that is what is important. It's not you should not think of another wallet or another value wallet, which is again creating inefficiencies, because wallet requires money to be kept in the bank, and that money is not earning. It's similar to a fiat currency, which is there. Being a cash economy, Sri Lanka has a huge amount of cash floating around, which is not in the banking system. So you can bring that to the banking system if you if you go into a digital currency kind of a digital equals CBDC kind of a scenario, in my view.
Okay, and I think you just touched on my last question to you is, in your personal investment decisions, how big a role does crypto have? Like, is there any part of it in your portfolio, or how big a part of it does it play?
So we have. I want to understand the cryptocurrency. That's the main reason that I make. I mean, it's not to make money out of cryptocurrency, of course, because I'm not that kind of a player in that sense. So I think just to understand how it works, early stages that we have been investing. But of course, it's as I mentioned, it's a gamble that you take. You know, it's like whether that crypto asset is something, whether it will be hold value like gold, or whether it will hold value like any other assets, is something a question mark that I have in my mind, right? Because there are some cryptocurrencies which are given a completely off name, but they have picked up in terms of the price. So we don't, I mean, I'm sure you know some of the currencies that I'm talking about, which doesn't have a real value in it, but it has created. So I think the early stages, these are being used for various other transactions, which you can't do through the normal fiat currency or normal means. Therefore, there is a demand, right? I think once it settles down to a certain extent, I think the real value of cryptos will come in the future.
Okay, great. I'm sure a lot of people who are even interested in investing would have learned a lot from that, and are kind of excited to see what Sri Lanka brings in terms of crypto. Just to end it, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of today's episode and taking time off your schedule to be here. Not just me, but I'm sure everyone in the startup community would have really appreciated all the advice you gave. So thank you so much for being here today. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Portia. Thank you. And thank you for entrepreneur Dr. K to inviting me for this session. And it's a pleasure.
Thank you.